Hey everyone. Ever get that feeling like the world's kind of stuck on doom and gloom? Like everything's going down the drain?
Yeah, it's easy to feel that way these days.
You're not alone. But T, what if I told you history's full of times when people pulled themselves OT of those dark ages and actually kicked off some pretty incredible renaissances?
Absolutely. And the exciting part is that we can learn from them. It's not just some feel-good history lesson. We actually have a great source for this, Gabriele Liebig's article, How to Turn a Dark Age into a New Renaissance. And Liebig's argument is really interesting. He says that both Dark Ages and Renaissances are choices that we make.
So you're saying no predestined doom. We're not just like stuck on this historical roller coaster of bad times.
Exactly. Liebig's point is that Dark Ages come from bad ideas and nobody doing anything about them.
Okay.
But when good ideas gain traction and people actually take action, that's when things turn around.
That's a huge shift in thinking. Instead of feeling helpless, we can learn from history's turnarounds and apply those lessons to build a better future. That's what we're doing in our deep dive today, using Liebig's work to really explore those moments, those turning points when people fought their way back to progress.
And to understand the climb, we kind of have to know what we're climbing OT of.
Right.
Liebig says a dark age has three main ingredients.
Okay.
You got economic collapse, usually paired with endless war.
Right.
You got living conditions getting worse, population shrinking, and maybe the worst part, education and culture break down. So knowledge gets lost with each generation.
Okay, so that's pretty bleak. You're saying this downward spiral isn't inevitable, though. I mean, looking around today.
Right. And history proves it. People have looked around at their own messes and said, enough is enough. And that's where we'll start, way back with ancient Greece, around the 8th century BC.
Ancient Greece, the land of philosophers and epic marble statues, what pulled them out of a dark age?
Well, picture this. Greece is in rough shape, just starting to recover, and along comes Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey.
Right.
It's not just a story,
Yeah.
It's practically a how-to guide for rebuilding civilization.
Okay, I've read The Odyssey. It's one thing to enjoy the adventure, but a blueprint for society. That's a new angle. What kind of how-to are we talking about here?
Liebig finds three big ideas that are woven into the story. First, the courage of heroes, even when things are falling apart. The Odyssey celebrates what humans can do, their potential.
Like Odysseus himself. Clever, brave, never gives up. It's a good reminder that even in the worst times, there's strength inside us, just waiting to be tapped.
Exactly. And the second idea is about choosing humanity over being godlike. Odysseus, he picks a normal life with his wife over living forever with a nymph.
Wow.
That's a powerful statement about how our choices actually matter.
It's not some destiny we're stuck with, right? We can shape our own futures, even if it means going against the gods. This is starting to sound relevant to today,
Absolutely. And that leads to the third idea, exploration and colonization. The Odyssey ends with Odysseus setting sail again to teach people who've never even seen a ship how to sail.
Wow.
This isn't just exploring for the fun of it. This is about spreading knowledge, connecting with different cultures.
It's like that adventurous spirit, seen as crucial for progress. Not just conquering, but sharing what you know, expanding everyone's horizons. I bet that resonated back then after being so isolated in their dark age.
It did. In fact, the Odyssey helped inspire the Greek colonization of the Mediterranean. This reignited cultural exchange got their economies moving again. A story, even a fictional one, having that kind of real-world impact is pretty amazing.
It makes you wonder what stories we're telling ourselves now and what kind of future they're setting us up for. But let's not jump too far ahead. What other turning points did ancient Greece have?
One that really speaks to us directly today comes from 6th century BC Athens. Picture it. Athens is deep in crisis. Debt is crippling them. Society's on edge. Unrest everywhere.
Wow.
Sounds familiar, right?
Unfortunately, yes. So what did the ancient Greeks do? Protest. New laws.
Well, their leader, Solon, he came up with a radical solution. He canceled everyone's debts.
Whoa.
A complete wipeout. They called it the Sisaktheia. This freed people who were basically stuck as debt slaves and gave their economy some breathing room.
Wait, he just erased it all, no strings attached. That sounds almost too good to be true.
Of course, it wasn't that simple. There was pushback and all that. But this bold move really laid the groundwork for Athens becoming a powerhouse of culture and politics. Think about that when we're staring down our own debt problems today.
It makes you wonder if we're too timid for big solutions. Sometimes you need a clean break to really change things, not just a Band-Aid.
It's a parallel worth thinking about. But remember, Solon wasn't just fixing finances. It was about justice, freeing people from that burden of debt to create a fairer society. That's a crucial element we often miss.
You're right, it's not about quick fixes. It's about tackling the root causes, not just the symptoms. And often those causes are found in the realm of ideas, which brings us to Plato, specifically his allegory of the cave from the 4th century BC.
Ah, Plato's cave. You've probably heard about it, but how does it connect to escaping dark ages and building renaissances?
Right.
Well, it's actually very relevant. Imagine, prisoners in a cave mistaking shadows on the wall for reality.
Yeah.
I guess, right. We think we know things based on this limited information.
Okay, I'm seeing the connection now. We can get so lost in the shadows of our time, like information overload and all the negativity, that we miss what's truly important.
That's it. We're bombarded with information today, but Plato's point is true knowledge takes effort. You have to climb out of that cave into the light of truth.
It's like we have to consciously choose to become informed and not just accept whatever shadows are projected at us.
Exactly.
It's a call to be critical thinkers. Don't just accept the shadows you're shown. Seek out the real knowledge that can lead you and all of us out of that cave.
And just like Odysseus' journey, there's that call to action. Those who've seen the light have a duty to help others. It's on us to guide others out, even if it's dangerous.
It reminds me of Socrates, Plato's teacher. He was sentenced to death for questioning the way things were, but sharing knowledge, fighting for truth, even when it's risky, that's how things change.
A timeless lesson. Speaking of spreading ideas, that brings us to the rise of Christianity in the 1st century AD.
Christianity, that's a massive turning point in history, but how does it fit into our Renaissance theme? I always thought of it more as a religious movement.
Well, think of it as a huge blending of ideas.
Yeah.
Christianity took bits from Mosaic law, Egyptian thought, and Greek philosophy, particularly Plato's.
Okay.
It was a cultural exchange in itself. People like St. Paul spreading these ideas across the Roman Empire. That's how ideas cross borders and shake things up.
So it wasn't just about religious roles, but introducing new ways to think about humanity, morality, how we relate to the world. That is a shift in thinking, even for those who weren't religious.
Precisely. And then you have St. Augustine, who created this whole concept of Platonic Christianity, merging philosophy and religion even deeper.
It's fascinating to see how these different ideas, from Greek philosophy to early Christianity, are all weaving together, like a slow burn towards a Renaissance, even while the Roman Empire was falling apart.
History's not a neat line from A to B, right? Seeds of change are planted during chaos all the time. And speaking of chaos, we're about to enter what's called the Dark Ages. But even in the darkest night, there are flickers of light. And our next stop will shed some light on one of them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this flicker of light you're talking about? Lead the way.
Our next beacon of light shines on Charlemagne. Most people think knights and castles, but he was a champion of education. This was during the Dark Ages, remember?
Hold on, Charlemagne. I thought he was more of a warrior king. Plus, wasn't he, illiterate? How does that make him a champion of education?
That's what's so interesting about him. He couldn't read himself, but he knew how crucial knowledge was for progress. He actually brought scholars to his court, like Alcuin, who dreamt of creating a new Athens.
So he was more of a visionary, someone who understood how powerful ideas could be. But how do you put those ideas into action when so few people can read, let alone study philosophy?
Charlemagne was a man of action. He didn't just talk about education. He built schools, had textbooks made, even worked on standardizing language to boost literacy and build a sense of nationhood. Imagine that, trying to get everyone on the same page, literally.
Wow, he really was a Renaissance man trapped in the Dark Ages. But was it all about book smarts? Or did he focus on practical things too?
Oh, he understood that progress had to be well-rounded. He introduced things like model farms and public works projects to improve the economy. He knew that people needed food on their tables and a stable society to truly thrive.
He was thinking on multiple levels: education, culture, economics. It's like he knew a real Renaissance needed a big picture approach. But wasn't Charlemagne also famous for expanding his empire through conquest? Did he try to share his vision with the people he conquered?
He did. He was a big believer in diplomacy and cultural exchange, even reaching out to the Islamic world, which was experiencing its own golden age at the time.
Now that's something you don't hear every day. Charlemagne collaborating with the Islamic world during the Dark Ages. Talk about breaking stereotypes. It reminds me of how we tend to put historical periods into these neat little boxes, when in reality things were much more fluid.
Exactly. Cultures weren't isolated back then,
Mhm.
They influenced each other, exchanged ideas, learned from one another. And Charlemagne was a key figure in that exchange. One fascinating story is about his diplomatic mission to Harun al-Rashid, the caliph in Baghdad. It took 4 years and involved a live elephant as a gift.
A live elephant. Wow, talk about going the extra mile. It makes you wonder how long it took to transport an elephant across continents back then. It must have been an incredible spectacle.
It certainly was. This story really shows both the challenges and the rewards of cross-cultural exchange in that era. Charlemagne was willing to go to great lengths to build relationships and learn from other cultures. He saw the value in bridging divides, something we could learn a lot from today.
Absolutely. Especially with so much tension and division in the world right now. We often think of the Dark Ages as this totally backward time, but Charlemagne's reign proved that progress can happen in the most unlikely circumstances. It's like seeing those first flowers bloom in the spring after a long, harsh winter.
A perfect analogy. Even in the midst of what we call darkness, those seeds of a renaissance were being planted. And speaking of renaissances, our journey now takes us east to the Islamic Golden Age and the remarkable work of a scholar named Ibn Sina.
Ibn Sina. You know, I'm not familiar with that name, but it sounds like he played a big part in this Islamic Renaissance you mentioned.
He did. Ibn Sina, or Avicenna as he's known in the West, was a true polymath, physician, philosopher, and even a politician. He was born in present-day Uzbekistan and received an exceptional education. By the age of 17, he was already a celebrated physician, even curing the Sultan of Bukhara from a mysterious illness.
Wow, a teenage medical prodigy curing royalty. That's impressive. What else did he achieve?
Well, his Canon of Medicine was a groundbreaking medical textbook used in Europe for centuries. It contained an incredible amount of knowledge, including his own discoveries about the contagious nature of diseases like tuberculosis.
So he was pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge, even back then. That's incredible. What about his philosophical work?
His Book of Healing explores philosophical ideas that are still relevant today. He dived deep into the concept of God as the necessary being, the ultimate source of everything. But he wasn't just interested in lofty theological debates.
Was he looking at the human side of things too? How our minds work, how we create?
Exactly. He had this fascinating idea that the creative force that drives the universe is the same force that powers the human mind. He believed that each of us has a spark of that creative power within us.
So there's a connection between the universe's creative energy and our own ability to think, to innovate, to imagine. That's a pretty profound idea. It suggests that we're not just passive observers of the universe, but active participants in its ongoing creation.
That's the beauty of Ibn Sina's work. He constantly challenged us to think bigger, to see the connections between ourselves and the world around us. And he didn't just stop at thinking. Ibn Sina also believed in putting knowledge into action. He wasn't just a scholar, he's a politician and a social reformer. He believed that we have a responsibility to use our knowledge to make the world a better place.
So it's not enough to have brilliant ideas, we actually have to apply them, do something with them.
Exactly. And Ibn Sina lived that principle. He wasn't content to just sit in his study and ponder the mysteries of the universe. He wanted to make a real difference in the world. And one way he did that was through language. Even though he was Persian, he wrote many of his works in Arabic. This helped to spread his ideas far and wide, contributing to the Islamic Golden Age.
It's like language became a bridge connecting cultures, allowing ideas to flow freely and leading to new discoveries. We often take language for granted, but it's such a powerful tool for sharing knowledge and building connections.
It truly is. And the development of the Arabic language itself was a key factor in the Islamic Renaissance. It allowed for complex ideas to be expressed and disseminated, fueling that incredible period of intellectual and cultural growth. Think of it as laying the groundwork for the scientific revolution that would later transform Europe.
It's fascinating how these different Renaissances, Greek, Islamic, were all connected, influencing and building upon each other. It makes you realize that progress isn't just a straight line. It's more like a web, with ideas weaving back and forth across time and cultures.
A beautiful image. And now we're moving towards the Renaissance that many are most familiar with, the era of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, those iconic figures. But before we dive into all that artistic and scientific brilliance, we need to address a common misconception. We often think of the Renaissance as happening after the Dark Ages, a sudden shift from darkness to light.
Right, like flipping a switch. But you're saying it's not that simple.
Not quite. The Renaissance actually started during the Dark Ages. The plague and all that human flourishing, they coexisted.
So it wasn't a clean break, a sudden burst of light. It was more like a gradual emergence, like those first shoots pushing up through the soil after a long winter.
Exactly. And this is a crucial point, especially for anyone feeling pessimistic about the world today. Even in the darkest times, there are seeds of hope, those glimmers of a brighter future waiting to be nurtured. But how did this Renaissance actually take root? Was it a top-down movement driven by powerful rulers?
That's what I'd assume. Kings and queens deciding it was time for a renaissance. But you're saying it was something else entirely.
It began with individuals and small groups who were passionate about rediscovering and building upon the best ideas from the past, people who refused to let the light of knowledge be extinguished. One example is the Paradiso of Alberti, a group of artists, writers, and thinkers who gathered to discuss ideas and share their work.
Paradiso of Alberti sounds almost like a secret society. Were they revolutionaries, hiding from the authorities?
Not quite revolutionaries, but they were definitely pushing boundaries. They believed in the power of human creativity, and they were committed to reviving classical knowledge. They translated ancient texts, conducted scientific experiments, and explored new forms of artistic expression.
So it was a grassroots movement fueled by passion and a thirst for knowledge. People just coming together, driven by their own curiosity and desire to learn. That's really inspiring.
It is, and they weren't content to just stay in their little group. They actively tried to recruit influential people like Coluccio de Salutati, the Chancellor of Florence. They knew that to make a real impact, they needed to spread their ideas and gain support from those in power.
So they understood that progress needs both grassroots energy and strategic alliances. It's not enough to have great ideas. You have to build a movement and find ways to put those ideas into practice. That's a lesson many movements could learn from today.
Absolutely. And one of the key figures in this Golden Renaissance, a true champion of dialogue and cross-cultural understanding, was Nicholas of Cusa. He embodied that spirit of bridging divides and seeking knowledge wherever it could be found.
Nicholas of Cusa. The name rings a bell, but I can't quite place him. What made him so special?
He was a true Renaissance man, theologian, philosopher, mathematician, astronomer, and even a diplomat. He was born in Germany but spent much of his life in Italy. He was a man of deep faith who also embraced the power of human reason and the pursuit of knowledge.
So a man of faith and science. That's a combination you don't see too often, even today.
Cusa was truly ahead of his time. One of his most important contributions was his work on ecumenical dialogue. In 1437, he was sent to Constantinople to talk with the Eastern Church. This eventually led to a brief reunification of the Eastern and Western churches in 1439. Imagine that, trying to bridge the divide between these two branches of Christianity that had been separated for centuries.
He was a bridge builder, trying to find common ground. That's a powerful message, especially in our world today with so much religious and political division. Do you think he faced resistance? Was it controversial back then to even consider working with the Eastern Church?
He absolutely faced opposition. But Cusa was a man of conviction. He believed in the power of dialogue and understanding to overcome even the deepest divisions. And he didn't stop there. After Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, he wrote De Pace Fide, On the Peace of Faith. This was a powerful call for peace and understanding between different religions.
On the Peace of Faith. That title alone feels incredibly relevant right now. What was his main message in this work?
Cusa argued for the idea of one religion in a variety of rites. He was advocating for peace and respect between different faiths, a radical idea for his time, and one that, sadly, we're still struggling with today. What's even more remarkable is that in his work, he praises Ibn Sina, the Islamic scholar we just discussed.
That's amazing. A Christian cardinal praising an Islamic philosopher in the 15th century. That really challenges the narrative we often hear about this supposed clash of civilizations. It shows that even in those times, there were people who saw beyond religious and cultural boundaries.
Exactly. Cusa was a true humanist, someone who believed in the universal power of human reason and the importance of learning from different cultures. His writings give us a glimpse into this vision. He wrote, "The human spirit is capable of marvelous arts and is, as it were, wisdom's imprint. In this spirit, more than in anything else, eternal wisdom shines forth as in a close image of itself."
That's beautiful. He's saying that there's a spark of the divine within each of us, a capacity for creativity and wisdom that reflects something bigger than ourselves.
He also stressed the importance of finding true happiness, not through material wealth or power, but through a connection with what he called the fount of life itself.
So it's about connecting with something greater than ourselves, finding meaning and purpose through something beyond the everyday grind. It sounds like a spiritual quest, but one that anyone can relate to, regardless of their beliefs.
Exactly. And Cusa's work is a testament to the enduring power of these humanist ideals, even in a world often dominated by conflict and division. He believed in the power of dialogue to overcome differences and build bridges between people.
Cusa's story is really resonating with me. It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity of our times, but he reminds us that there have always been people who strive for peace and understanding, who dedicate their lives to building bridges, not walls. But how do we apply these ideas to our lives today? It all feels a bit abstract.
That's a great question. And that's where Liebig's article takes a really interesting turn. He creates a fictional dialogue between Ibn Sina, Cusa, Leibniz, and Linda LaRouche, bringing together these brilliant minds from different eras to discuss the core principles of the Renaissance.
A fictional dialogue. That's so creative. What do these figures discuss? It's like a dream team of intellectuals from across history.
They discuss many things, but one key theme is the nature of the human mind. They draw on Leibniz's work, which distinguished human reason from animal instinct.
So they're getting at what makes human thinking unique. What sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom? What gives us the ability to reflect on our own existence and try to understand the universe?
Exactly. They also examine Cusa's idea of two levels of reason, a lower mechanical level and a higher insightful one. It's similar to the distinction Plato made in his allegory of the cave.
So they're building on each other's work, adding layers of complexity and nuance to our understanding of human consciousness.
Exactly. And they also delve into how ideas come into being and how they shape reality. They discuss Ibn Sina's insight that human ideas require a constantly renewed resolution of will to be realized.
So just having good ideas isn't enough. We need willpower, action to bring them to life. Otherwise, they just stay in the realm of thought.
Precisely. And that's where LaRouche's concept of physical economy comes in. He argued that true economic progress isn't just about financial gains, but about increasing our capacity to produce through scientific and technological advancement.
Physical economy, that's a new term for me. How does it relate to this conversation about ideas and progress?
LaRouche believed that real economic growth comes from discovering and applying new physical principles. Think about inventions like the printing press, the steam engine, the computer. They all came about through scientific discovery, but their real impact was in how they transformed our ability to produce and create.
So it's not just about making money. It's about improving our ability to build, to innovate, to create things that improve our lives.
Exactly. And LaRouche argued that to achieve this kind of progress, we need to focus on infrastructure, education, scientific research, the things that actually increase productivity and make life better for everyone.
So it's a long-term vision, a commitment to investing in the future, not just chasing short-term profits.
Precisely. And LaRouche also emphasized the importance of culture. He believed that a society's values and beliefs shape its economic potential. A society that values creativity, innovation, and hard work will be much more likely to achieve real economic progress than a society that is complacent or focused solely on consumption.
It makes sense. If we want to create a renaissance, we need a culture that supports it. But how do we create that kind of culture?
That's the big question, and one we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at what those seeds of a renaissance might be in our world today and how we can nurture them, using the lessons we've learned from history to light the way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Ancient Greece, early Christianity, Charlemagne, the Islamic Golden Age, and even touched on the Italian Renaissance. And we've seen how people pulled themselves out of dark ages time and time again, sparking this incredible progress. But the big question is, how do we use all this in our world today? What are the seeds of a new Renaissance that, we can start growing?
Well, the fascinating thing is those seeds are all around us, even if they're a little hard to see sometimes with all the chaos going on.
Yeah.
Think about how globally connected we are now. Charlemagne dreamed of that with his elephants and long journeys, but we have the internet.
Right.
It's flawed, sure, but it lets us share ideas in a way that's never been possible before.
That's true. I can talk to someone on the other side of the world instantly. We can share knowledge, we can work on projects together, even become friends across borders. It's like that exploration spirit from the Odyssey, but digital.
Exactly. And don't forget the science and tech breakthroughs happening right now. Medicine, renewable energy. It's like we're on the edge of a whole new technological revolution that could solve some of humanity's biggest problems.
It's almost like those new physical principles that LaRouche talked about are being discovered all the time. But here's the thing that worries me. It doesn't feel like these advances are helping everyone. There's so much inequality, so much conflict. It's easy to think we're going backwards, not forwards.
That's a valid point.
Hmm.
And this is where the idea of human agency, of making choices, becomes crucial. Remember Odysseus choosing a normal life over being immortal. It's like a metaphor for engaging with the real world, messy as it is, instead of trying to escape or just clinging to systems that don't work anymore.
So we can't just hope that tech will fix everything. We have to shape how it's used, right? Make sure it helps all of humanity, not just a few lucky ones.
You got it. We need to be more like Solon, willing to challenge the way things are, even if it means proposing radical solutions. What if we had a debt jubilee on a global scale, freeing nations from crushing debt so they could invest in their people, their infrastructure?
No, that would be radical. Can you imagine the possibilities? It could be a game changer, especially for developing countries that are struggling under all that debt.
It's worth considering, for sure. And it highlights how important it is to, think big, to challenge assumptions and not be afraid of bold solutions.
Just like those Renaissance thinkers who dared to imagine a world beyond the limits of their time, right? They weren't scared to question dogma, to push knowledge further, to explore new horizons.
And that's the spirit we need today. We have to be like those humanist scholars, loving knowledge, eager to learn from the past, but also driven to create something new and better.
It's about embracing that potential that each of us has, right? That capacity for creativity, reason, compassion that lets us make a real difference.
Exactly. And progress isn't just about, fancy gadgets and inventions. It's about building a society where knowledge, justice, and human dignity are valued, where everyone has a chance to reach their full potential.
It's like that new Athens that Alcuin talked about, but on a global scale, where education, culture, science, these are seen as essential for everyone to thrive.
What a vision. But remember, renaissances don't just happen overnight. They come from countless actions, people choosing to make things better in their own little corners of the world.
So it's not about waiting for a hero or some magic solution. It's about each of us doing what we can right now to help those seeds of progress grow.
Precisely. Teach a kid to read, plant a garden, support an artist, speak out against injustice. All these small acts, multiplied by millions, create that ripple effect that can change the world.
Like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. It reminds us that we're not helpless. Each of us has a part to play in shaping the future.
And even when things seem dark, there are always those flickers of light. Ibn Sina writing his amazing works while he was imprisoned, Renaissance artists and scholars keeping knowledge alive during the plague. These are inspiring examples of how the human spirit can triumph, even in the darkest of times.
Those stories really give me hope. It's about finding that strength inside, that resilience that keeps us going even when we feel surrounded by darkness. It's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves, to the legacy of progress that stretches back through history and continues on into the future.
Exactly. And that brings us back to our original question. How do we turn a dark age into a renaissance? Well, the answer lies within each of us. It's about taking those Renaissance principles, human agency, the power of ideas, action, knowledge, culture, justice, and actually applying them to our lives, our communities, our world.
So instead of being overwhelmed by all the problems we see, we can actually see them as opportunities. Chances to be the heroes of our own time, to write our own chapter in this story of progress.
You got it. Renaissances aren't just big historical moments. They're also about those everyday acts of courage, creativity, and kindness that make the world a little brighter, a little fairer, a little more beautiful.
So go out there, be the change you want to see, nurture those seeds of a renaissance no matter how small they seem. Because together, we can turn this dark age into a bright new era of human flourishing. And who knows, maybe centuries from now, someone will look back at our time and be amazed by the renaissance WE sparked.
Now that is a legacy worth working for. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, but remember, the conversation doesn't stop here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, because that's the spirit that ignites renaissances and build a better future for everyone.